And I'm probably getting off topic a little bit with this, but just go and look up words such as individual. A lot of people think this means to be someone who is unique, but really it comes from the word indivisible, which means you are simply one peg in the massive porridge of human population, and you are indivisible to anybody else. Therefore, you are not unique at all. You are indivisible from the masses. That's what the word individual means. If you look up the word nice, that's a good one. They're always telling us to be nice. If you look up the origins of the word nice, it comes from the Latin necere, which means to be ignorant. Later in Middle French, it was stupid and uninformed. So basically to be nice is to be ignorant, stupid and uninformed, and just be quiet and don't rock the boat and just be nice. Well, folks, I don't think we should be nice, and I think we really should begin to really comprehend the language that we are speaking. But as I said, I'm probably getting a little off topic with that. But etymology is a very interesting subject and something that I do recommend people investigate. But folks, this whole Pizzagate thing is very, very carefully being orchestrated. The way attention is being shifted onto the pizza store, as I said earlier, there are many people who are attacking the pizza store, and the pizza store should not be the focus of attention. Attacking the pizza store will achieve two very predictable outcomes. One, it will achieve the censoring of the independent media, and we'll see the introduction of massive internet restrictions and mean the end of the internet as we know it. And two, it will result in all of the sleeping masses out there being convinced that there was really nothing to any of this pedophile investigation, and they will all throw the real and factual pedophile information out with the bathwater when they throw out the attacks against a small business. That's how it will be played. It will allow the pedophiles to get off scot-free and to be laughing while they do it, because they just pulled off a hoodwink right in front of everybody's faces. They exposed themselves to the world and then convinced everybody not to believe it, simply due to the attacks upon a small business. You know, at this point, all they really have to do is go and assassinate an Elefantis and members of his family or a couple of his friends, or even just him by himself. Just go and blow his head off in his apartment, claim that it was suicide, and then the mainstream media will have a field day of how a small business owner was driven to suicide due to fake news, and then you can say goodbye to the internet as we know it. And not only that, but it will allow the pedophiles who are running this world to expand their harvest and make it even more obvious, and people won't do anything about it because no one will believe it, because I'll just look at it and I'll go, oh, that's that Pizzagate thing again. We already proved that this isn't happening. And how preposterous that you could think these upstanding politicians, these people we employ to keep us safe, these people who are fighting these wars in our name and keeping us all safe from terrorism, how preposterous that you could think these people would have a bad or dangerous bone in their body. How preposterous for you to think that they could be hurting us in any way. That's what will happen, folks, if people do not shift focus back to where it should be, which is the content of the Podesta emails, the pedophile ring that these emails expose, and all of the information we've gathered all around the world for so many years proving this pedophile ring exists. We can actually link it now with these emails. We can see through the release of the Podesta emails how necessary it is for politicians' emails to be open to scrutiny, how it is so necessary for us to have transparency in government, because we cannot allow this situation to continue. And if we play things the right way, we can move in that direction. We can move towards exposing this entire sick circle of cacostocracy that runs this world. But if we continue to focus on the pizza store, it's all going to go away, folks. The pizza store's a play, and it's been put there as a play. And unfortunately, people are buying right into it. All the world is a stage, ladies and gentlemen. When a leak like this comes out, which is such a revealing leak, then it needs to be managed and micromanaged. And the most important thing to do with this leak is to shift attention away from the actual leak itself to a side issue. And that's what they've done with the introduction of the pizza store. Sure, there's connections to this pizza store, but the fervour that's been whipped up around it and making that the centre of focus is exactly what the mainstream media wants people to do, because that gives them the tool that they need to implement their counter-narrative and introduce their anti-script to what is really going on. So people need to be very, very careful of how they're being played. But I think we've reached break time here, folks, so I'm going to have to leave it there for now, and we're going to have a break. Thank you for joining me in the air today. It's always a pleasure to have your company, and I'll speak to you again in a few minutes. Thanks for listening. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, so Pizzagate is an interesting phenomenon, but it's important that people see how it's controlled and how it's being played, because Pizzagate has the potential to either expose the system once and for all and free humanity, or the potential to completely lock humanity down and prevent all the sleeping masses from ever lifting back the veil and looking at the workings of the machine again. It really has the potential to go either way. It's just how it's going to be played. And people have to understand how these leaks are managed and how much is really involved in all this. Even with the link with the Podesta brothers and Madeleine McCann, you know, the identikit pictures, they match up so dramatically that you have to wonder whether they're real. You have to wonder how, when there was only reported to be one abductor, of Madeleine McCann, cited by two different witnesses, how the two different witnesses could come up with such completely different descriptions of the perpetrator, and why each of the two descriptions, when you put them together, happen to look exactly like the Podesta brothers. So you've got to wonder whether this is planted misinformation that's been planted by, I don't know, FBI sources or some forces within law enforcement that has been used to gain leverage over the Podesta brothers, or whether there is actually truth to the matter and truth that they can be placed in Portugal at the time of Madeleine McCann's disappearance. So there's a lot of stuff to look at when investigating this, folks. There's a lot of ways that we're being played, and it's really important that people step back and look at things objectively and be careful what they believe. And be careful not to allow that belief to block out something else that might be right in their face, something that they're refusing to see simply because of the belief they've already adopted. It's very important to remain objective when looking at all of this, folks, because this is a huge potential, but again, it could go either way. It could be highly beneficial for freedom, or it could be highly detrimental and end up in severe internet restrictions and a severe curtailing of free speech. So we've really got to watch how we're being played. You know, the real problem here is that people simply don't understand the scope of what they're dealing with. They really don't. They think that this is about a pizza store. And it's not about a pizza store. It's not even about the fact that Podesta has been touching up children. It's the fact that there is a global pedophile ring that is running this world. This is just the tip of the iceberg. But focusing on the pizza store is just a ridiculous thing to do, and it's exactly what the media wants people to do. And people need to step back and really look at this and realize that it's what's going on behind the scenes, which is more important. It's the mechanism that exists behind government, behind the banking system, behind everything that we see as society, and who runs this system and what's really going on. That's what's important, and that's what this has the potential to expose if people can get their focus back to the right point and realize that it's not about the pizza store. You know, people are so played. They really are. And all of the information that's brought them, people are led down rabbit holes and led down the garden path and always kept distracted and not ever really looking at the root core of the problem. And the media is very, very clever at doing this. There's also elements within the independent media that are also very clever at doing this. You know, a lot of the independent media is controlled, folks. And even looking at some of the Pizzagate information, you know, what we've seen recently with the disappearance of Julian Assange, I mean, it seems pretty obvious that Assange has been nabbed. They've got him, they've taken him somewhere. You've got to look at the timing of the release of this Pizzagate information as well. Is the Pizzagate information actually being released by legitimate WikiLeaks sources? Or was it released after WikiLeaks was compromised? Because WikiLeaks appears to have been compromised. With Assange disappeared, it's very important that people realise that the information coming from WikiLeaks now may well be controlled leaks. But again, the question of where is Julian Assange must be asked. It is kind of sobering to see someone who had such a high public profile and seemed to have so much support from people around the world, named Man of the Year, all sorts of stuff, can suddenly disappear and no one bats an eyelid. No one makes a public outcry. In the last month, there's been no proof of life that's been offered by anyone from the establishment, and it all seems very concerning. No one seems to be making any noise. It seems very sobering that someone of Assange's profile could simply be snatched away and no one seems to care. Certainly doesn't bode a good future for the rest of us anyway. The freaky thing about the whole Assange WikiLeaks situation is how someone who is reporting crimes, such as WikiLeaks is doing, can be charged for a crime, for reporting these crimes, simply because of the mechanism of national security they put in place. Again, the word magic, the spells that they write down, which are done, and you can see, obviously, via WikiLeaks and via the fact that Julian Assange has been viewed as a criminal for reporting crimes, you can see that the laws have been put in place to protect the criminals who write the laws. That is the main purpose of the legal system. It isn't to afford any protection for the man on the street. It's to provide a cloak of secrecy over the actions of the pedophiles and criminals who run the system. And the fact that anyone who speaks out against this system is charged with espionage or crimes or whatever, it shows just how convoluted the system is. It shows just how stupid the order followers are as well. I mean, these order followers, folks, who go and arrest people like Assange, I mean, really, you can blame the Prime Minister, you can blame the British government or whatever for the arrest of Julian Assange, but ultimately it's the blockheads with the uniforms on who went there and arrested him who are the real problem. These people are terminally stupid who simply spend their life supporting their own slavery. And that is such a strange thing for people to do. You know, it's the weirdest thing when looking at this system, folks, is realizing that the ones who control the people within the system are the other people. people, the ones who believe the orders are real. You've got some guy sitting in an office somewhere who believes he can control other people because someone wrote it down on paper that he can do it. And they do it, and they believe in it, and they think that this is all right and real, and they're doing the right thing. And they get all hoity-toity about it. If someone tries to step outside their rules and they've got a chance to squash someone else's life, they actually enjoy doing it because it makes them feel better about themselves. And this is what happens when you take everybody's rights away and you squash human consciousness into a box. Then you start giving little bits of authority to certain people within there, and they will start harvesting as much energy as they can from other people because that alleviates the pain that they're feeling, and that gives them access to other people's energy. They get to step on people and make themselves feel a little bit better about it. Unfortunately, this is the way human nature goes when you put people in a state of scarcity and competition, which is exactly what this monetary and social system is designed to do. If we live in a state of cooperation, none of this would be happening. But it's because we're forced to live in a state of scarcity and competition that we constantly are at each other's throats and trying to climb to the top of the pile. And that's really all a lot of people do with their lives, folks, is they try to climb to the top of the pile or get at least some large pile that they can sit on top of and proclaim themselves king of their pile. But when they get to near the end of their lives, they start looking back and thinking, what was it all for? Now I've got all this stuff that I don't need. What does it mean? I spent my life in the accumulation of stuff, which I can't take with me. So what was it all for? What was the point of it? Gaining social standing or social status or presenting myself as being more worthwhile than other people because I have more stuff than them. But what about me? What about who I am? What about my artistic contribution to this creation? What about the legacy I leave behind? What breadcrumbs did I leave for myself? How did I improve reality by my presence in it? How did I really live my life and express myself? What knowledge did I gain? What friends did I make? Who did I help along the way? That's really what it's about, folks. It's not about accumulating stuff, but we're caught in this washing machine when we're young. We go through the education system, we come out of school, we believe we have to get an education, we have to do this, we have to do that. We've got to get all these certificates, we've got to get letters after our name, and oh my God, anything we do in school, any bad thing is going to be a black mark against our name, which is going to prevent us from ever achieving anything in the workforce. And we believe we have to be part of the workforce. We can't ever just express ourselves and live our lives because we, of course, have to pay to be alive, so we've got to do all this stuff that the system tells us we should do. Then we get to the end of it and we think, what was it all for? It was just a big control system. It was just running between the lines that other people wrote down and thinking that this is what our life had to be. Thinking that if we collect more stuff, then we're going to be somehow in a better position than other people. But it doesn't work that way. That's not what life is about at all. And you get to a time where you realize that it's all been put there to keep us distracted. It's like watching movies, we're watching the movie of our life. We're living the movie of our life, but we're living it according to someone else's parameters. It's like a game. We think we have to make our way through the maze and come out of the maze with a big pile of goodies at the end of it. But it's not like that. It's all a distraction. It's all a distraction from ourselves, and it's a distraction from ever really looking around to notice just how we are controlled. It's a complicated system, sure. When you look at it legally, you look at it socially, it's a complicated system, but ultimately when you get down to the nitty-gritty of the whole thing, how we are controlled more than anything is through our own lack of belief in our own personal power, our willingness to follow orders, our willingness to follow the dictates of other people. We're kept occupied, we're kept distracted. Look at how a farm is run, folks. Look at how, if you've got a mouse in a cage, you give it little wheels to run on, you give it little toys to play with in order to keep it happy. So it's comfortable in its captivity. And that's kind of what they've done with us. They've given us little things to play with, little toys and trinkets that we can buy, which will keep us occupied, keep us happy. And they've given us somewhere to live, a roof over our head. But they've made sure that we have to work very, very hard to maintain that little piece of shelter for ourselves so that we can actually survive in the world. We have to work very, very hard to do that. No other species on this earth has to work so hard just to ensure that it has a place to be. Most creatures just live where they're born. Most tribes just live where they're born. If you look back at the Vedic culture that used to exist many, many years ago, well, that we're told existed, this was a system where everybody was provided for in as much as they were given the means to provide for themselves. If you were given a block of land and you were able to set that land up as a food forest in your school years, then you'd be free to live your life any way you wanted. And there'd be no reason for you to go and invade anybody else's country or steal anybody else's land because you had all the stuff you need there. We would have a cooperative society, but everything about this society is designed to make sure we cannot cooperate with each other. It's not profitable for us to cooperate with each other. So we're constantly distracted and we're never really given the time to look around and see what's really going on. But what's really going on, folks, is that this is a farm. It's a people farm. You're being harvested in many, many ways. You're being energetically harvested. Your whole life is being harvested. How many people live their life doing exactly what they want to do? They may believe they're doing what they want to do, but really they're not. They're doing what they've been trained to do. They've found a way through the system where they're able to accumulate wealth so then they can go out to the designated fun areas and enjoy the world. But everywhere you go now, it's the same as everywhere else. Now, look, I've probably gone right off topic with all of this, but the thing is, folks, is that it's a people farm. That's really what's going on here. And the harvesting that is going on behind the scenes is really what's most important. But it's people's failure to look there, people's refusal to look there, people's refusal to face the shadow that allows this harvest to continue. And it's the distracted state that they're kept in. And the way they always just choose the designated fun areas. No one wants to step outside of the safe zone. And the reason they choose the designated fun areas is because they need paper. They need to pay to go everywhere they want to go. They need paper to do anything they want to do. And so they go to places where they will be able to spend their money in enjoyable ways. They don't ever really look at this whole thing from a human perspective and look behind the scenes to see what's really going on. You know, this constant state of distraction has been a real problem. But with this whole Pizzagate issue, now that we're seeing the workings that are being exposed behind it, people may see the need to change things. But again, you've got to be very careful how this is being played, folks, because if they manage to pull off this hoodwink and get people to simply focus on the pizza store, and again, this is done through people's disconnected state. People, you know, you get people in society and you take all their rights away from them. They will lash out at anything they can get their hands on if they think they've got something to point the finger at. And the pizza store is a perfect thing. It's right there, hands on the ground, something they can get to. It's such a good play for the powers that be to do this. You know, if they can distract attention to the pizza store, then they can lock this whole thing down, folks. They can lock down dissent. They can close the minds of the public to the concept that there may even be this pedophile ring, which we know exists behind the scenes. You know, the human harvest that happens on this planet is massive, folks. It really is. People have no idea how many people are just missing, how many children just go missing. There's been reports of hundreds of people missing in Virginia, hundreds of children missing in Virginia. This is just the tip of the iceberg, folks. Most of the children that get used in these rituals come from overseas. Most of them are trafficked. Most of them are from the deprived populations. You'll get them from the most underprivileged populations in all of your countries, in most countries, and even the most underprivileged countries. This is why they go and marginalise so many countries, because when you marginalise a country and reduce the people in that country to absolute poverty, sometimes they're willing to sell their children. They'll sell their children because sometimes they think they're even going to a better life. They don't realise what's actually being done with these children. But sometimes it's just easy to steal kids from these sort of societies as well, folks. So you've got to look at how it's all played. But the dangerous thing about this Pizzagate issue is that it has the means to expose the whole lot of them, but it also provides the means for the system to shut down all dissent. And that's why we have to be so careful about how we're being played. And that's why it is so important for people to stop attacking the pizza store. You know, why is all the attention being focused there? Where are the Podesta brothers? Why isn't John Podesta coming public and answering a few questions? Why aren't questions being directed towards John Podesta? Why aren't questions being directed towards Hillary Clinton? Why aren't questions being directed towards Barack Obama as to what the $65,000 worth of pizza and hot dogs was all about? Why isn't this question being directed at John Podesta? Where is John Podesta? He seems to have disappeared almost as completely as Julian Assange. Why aren't these questions being asked? It's really important that people realise that this is where the focus needs to be. You know, what has brought this whole situation about is the emails of John Podesta. And that is the root core of the issue, and that is where the attention needs to be focused. You know, the problem is that people are so easily led, and people so want their ideas to be right. They want to see an opening. They want to see light at the end of the tunnel. They want to latch on to anything they believe may bring them to safety. And there's a propensity to really jump in there head first and not really examine things properly, and we really do need to examine things properly. You know, the awakening that we've seen on the earth has really only been a partial awakening. You know, a lot of people have woken up to the fact that the system's there. They've woken up to the fact that they're controlled. They've woken up to the fact that it's all criminal. Everything's terribly wrong. But it's so convoluted, and there's so many order followers that work within the system that just can't see it and will continue to follow orders. And it's so difficult for people to see any way out. Do they just want to latch on to something like Pizzagate and hope that this is going to be it? And it could be. this could be what brings down the system, but it's got to be done in the right way. It's got to be looked at in the right way. And people have to be very, very careful of wanting their ideas to be true and losing their objectivity in the process. You've got to remain objective through the whole thing. You know, the human awakening, as I said, it's been good to see so many people becoming aware of how bad the system is and the fact that there's something wrong. But people are still only half awake. They're not awake enough to their own power. And they're not awake enough to really want to look behind the veil in most cases. I mean, some people are, but many people simply don't want to look behind that veil. And they don't want to implement the solution because the solution requires self-application. You know, people have to get involved themselves. They have to realize that there is no one coming to save them. I mean, this is what we've tried to do with the Full Circle Project, is provide the mechanism for people to get involved on the ground. Find people in your area that want to be involved and link up with them and see what you can achieve. Identify an issue in your local area that you believe you can tackle and find a way to tackle it. But get a support group around you to do it. You know, link up with people, become cooperative with people rather than competitive with people. You know, that's what Full Circle is all about. It's about creating support groups. It's about lighting grass fires all around the earth. But people have to get involved to do that. No one can lead you to safety. You have to do it yourself. Everybody has to do it themselves. And, you know, you've got to step back and look at all of this stuff. And Pizzagate, it's so interesting and it's so revealing, but it's also being so micromanaged. And it's almost too easy. It's almost too much of an easy fix. You know, it's like what we've wanted all along. It's just something like this to be revealed. But then they introduce the pizza store. They introduce certain little bits of misinformation around the pizza store, like claiming that there's an underground room and all this sort of stuff before they know it. You know, you have to understand that it's going to take a while to really open this whole thing up. And in the last 2 weeks, if that underground room was there, they could have filled it in by now. I mean, all of these things can be done, folks, and people have to watch how they're being played. You know, like I said, folks, the awakening has been there, but it hasn't been as much as I want to see. It hasn't been a real eye-opener. It hasn't been an epiphany. It hasn't been where people suddenly go, aha, and they see the mechanism and they see the way out of the mechanism. And they see the way out of the mechanism is by simple cooperation, simple non-compliance to the system. You know, stop feeding it. Stop feeding the beast. Walk away, stop feeding it, and it will die. But people don't believe they can stop feeding it because of rules that are written down on paper, because of word magic, because of the spells that they're subject to, and their need to go out there and collect paper in order to pay to be alive. Yeah, it's the most difficult thing for many people is when they see the system, they just go, oh my God, it's so big and so vast. How do we ever find a way out of it? You know, and really it's just getting people to look up from their books, look up from their computer screens, look up at the sky, just tear themselves away from their work for a moment and just look around them. The order followers have to do this, but they're so caught up in their rules, they're so caught up in their regulations, and they feel so important for enforcing someone else's parameters on other people because they've had all their own power removed. It's a difficult thing. It's a really, really difficult obstacle to overcome. People's belief that they must follow orders, people's belief that they must obey the dictates of others, even if those dictates cause them to step outside of their moral compass. This is such a big hurdle to overcome. You know, I truly believe that the best way you can overcome it is to lead by example in all that you do. And that's why I live my life the way I do. And folks, look, I don't always get it right. I lash out at people. I say the wrong things sometimes, but I try to help everybody that I come into contact with. I try to not profit from people, and I try to reach out to people and help them at every opportunity that I can. Sometimes it's a little difficult. Sometimes it's a little taxing. Sometimes spirit will push you to your limits in order to do so. But when something feels right, you know, you've just got to do it. And that's the way I've tried to live my life. I've tried to live my life in a state of service to creation. Not just service to myself, but service to everybody, but not neglecting myself along the way. I have to serve myself, but not at the expense of others. And we can all do that. You know, I think the awakening will come. I just wonder how much more people will need to be pushed before they realize that they have the power themselves. It doesn't help pointing the finger at the pizza shop. It doesn't help pointing the finger at Hillary Clinton and expecting Donald Trump to come and save you. None of this stuff helps. It's about discovering your own personal power and facing the shadow that exists in the world and realizing that through standing in your own personal power, you have the ability to overcome this shadow. You know, if we were to work together cooperatively and simply stand up and call it, we have the ability to change everything. We really do. That's the frustrating part for me, is seeing just how easy it would be for us to change the world and seeing just how nervous or scared people are of actually stepping into that and actually doing it. Now, people are very, very apprehensive of stepping into their power. They're very, very nervous of putting their head up and calling things out for the way they see them. They're really nervous of being anything that may be considered to be politically incorrect. But as I've often said, folks, political correctness is a form of tyranny. Political correctness is mind control. Political correctness teaches you to constrain your own thoughts and to not say what you really believe and what you really feel. Political correctness should be thrown in the dustbin with all of the other stuff this government creates. Political correctness is simply people believing that they can control what comes out of other people's mouths because they believe it may be offensive to someone. Well, what about this entire system, folks? What about the fact that we're kept in a state of debt slavery and we're fighting wars and we're killing millions of people? To me, I find that offensive, and I find it even more offensive that people are willing to allow themselves to be constrained by other people's dictates in order to allow these types of offences to continue. I think it's about time we did something about it. But folks, I think we've reached the end of the show here today, so I'm going to have to leave it there for now. It is some disaster for any mind to hold any one thing for truth that is untrue, however insignificant it be, or however honestly it be held. It is a greater disaster when the false prejudice bars the way to some truth behind it, which, but for it, would find an entrance to the soul. And the greatness of the disaster will in this case be measured by the importance of the excluded truth. And this week's opening quote comes from Henry Liddon. Welcome to Surviving the Matrix. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Maxwell Egan. It's a pleasure to be with you once again, and I will be your host for the next hour. One really must be careful when proclaiming the truth on any matter, folks, and one must be very careful of what they choose to believe along the way. As I've often said, belief is the enemy of knowledge, and when you choose to believe something, then you often block your mind off.